Once upon a time in an age when the world still trembled at the touch of ancient magic and the winds carried whispers of forgotten tales, there lived a wicked sprite, a creature whose heart brimmed with malice and mischief, a being so twisted in spirit that some said he was the devil himself walking in disguise, delighting in nothing more than the corruption of every pure and beautiful thing under the sun. And one day, in his wickedness, he forged a mirror unlike any other, a looking glass of dreadful and dangerous power, for it did not reflect truth. Instead it distorted, twisted, mocked, and destroyed it, casting every good and noble thing in the world as something hideous and wretched, so that mountains resembling ancient giants now appeared like burnt heaps of soot. Majestic forests seemed like tangled masses of black, lifeless weeds, and the most radiant flowers bloomed not in beauty, but in grotesque shapes that looked diseased and rotting. And the sprite danced with cruel joy, declaring that now the world would finally see how foolish beauty truly was. Soon his students, a horde of smaller sprites equally mischievous though not as cunning, took great pleasure in flying the mirror high across the heavens, eager to laugh at the angels themselves. But as they soared closer toward the stars, carrying the dreadful mirror in quivering hands, it trembled violently, their tiny fingers losing grip as the winds howled around them. And despite the wicked sprite's shrieked commands to hold it steady, the mirror slipped from their grasp, plummeting through the sky until it struck the earth with such force that it shattered into countless fragments, splinters so small they glimmered like grains of sand and blew across the world on the wild winds, entering eyes and hearts of unsuspecting people. And when a shard pierced someone's eye, it twisted their vision so that kindness looked like foolishness, goodness seemed like weakness, and beauty appeared ugly. And when a shard sank into a person's heart, it froze into ice, chilling them from within, turning them cold, unfeeling, and incapable of love, so that the sprite cackled in triumph, believing chaos would now reign forever. Yet the world, resilient as always, had other plans and far from any palace or throne. In a humble town where the winters were long and summers sweet, lived two children named Kay and Gerda, not siblings by birth but bound by a love and tenderness that made them closer than many who share blood, for their homes stood so near one another that the gutters nearly touched. And below their windows, each family kept wooden boxes filled with soil to grow roses and herbs. And the two children, in their innocent creativity, had bridged the narrow gap between the houses with planks and boards, creating a small garden walkway among the roses where, every summer, they sat reading stories, whispering secrets, watching bees hum lazily through warm air, dreaming dreams no mirror shard could ever darken, until the winter that changed everything, when the snow drifted softly like feathers shaken loose from giant birds and the world fell silent beneath its white blanket. One day, Kay and Gerda sat by the frosted window watching the snowflakes swirl outside in delicate patterns, and Kay, with the playful curiosity of childhood, declared that each snowflake looked like a tiny white bee, while Gerda wondered where such snow bees might live, imagining perhaps they dwelled in a hive belonging to the Snow Queen herself high in the sky, a majestic yet fearsome ruler of winter. And just then, carried upon the cold wind, a tiny sliver of the wicked mirror drifted invisibly into Kay's eye, while another splinter pierced his heart. And though Kay cried out for a moment in pain, it passed quickly, and the change began subtle at first, then unmistakable. When Gerda reached out in concern, he pushed her away harshly, snapping at her to stop fussing, accusing her of crying over nothing, and from that moment Kay's heart grew colder. The roses they once cherished together appeared ugly to him, their fragrance cloying, their colors garish in the snow. Instead of wondrous and magical, became to him only a symbol of bleak emptiness. He no longer delighted in stories or gentle games, but began to spend time with older boys who mocked fairy tales and laughed cruelly at simple joys. And poor Gerda watched helplessly as her beloved friend grew distant and sharp-tongued, though she continued to love him tenderly. Then, one bitter winter evening, as Kay dragged his small sled across the town square, a great white sleigh glided silently over the snow and halted beside him. And its driver, tall, regal, with eyes like frozen glass, smiled with an eerie, enchanting stillness, asking if he would like a ride. And Kay, no longer fearful of strange magic, nodded and tied his sled to hers as she instructed. But when the sleigh began to move, faster and faster, until the wind roared past him like a Living force, Kay realized something was terribly wrong, for the sleigh suddenly lifted from the ground and soared toward the sky. And though he cried out, the Snow Queen, for it was she, caught him in her arms. Kissing him once on the forehead, her kiss colder than any winter night, though it caused him no pain, for his heart was already frozen, and thus she carried him away into the dazzling northern lights, vanishing from the world below. When spring arrived and the snow melted from rooftops and roses budded once more, Gerda waited faithfully for Kay, but he did not return. And though townspeople whispered sorrowfully that the river must have carried him away and drowned him, Gerda refused to accept this, her heart strong with love and hope. So one morning, with her small shoes tied firmly and a prayer whispered under her breath, she climbed into a tiny boat and let the river carry her toward whatever lay ahead. The gentle current led her past meadows of swaying grasses and through quiet woods, until she arrived at a cottage covered with thousands upon thousands of flowers, tulips, daisies, roses climbing the walls, blossoms crowding every corner like a living tapestry, and an old woman stepped out wearing a hat painted with flowers, smiling kindly as she helped Gerda from the boat and invited her to stay, promising the most beautiful garden in the world, a place where Gerda could forget sorrow. And indeed, the garden was wondrous, an eternal summer full of warm breezes and singing birds, but strangely, amid all the blossoms, no roses grew, though Gerda did not notice at first, for the enchantment of the place dimmed her memories until one day she spotted a rose painted upon the old woman's hat, and the sight struck her like lightning, awakening her heart. She ran through the garden searching desperately until she found a single rose behind a hedge, kissed it with trembling lips, and at once remembered Kay, the roses they had tended, and her journey. The roses whispered softly that Kay was not dead, that they had seen him pass through the north, and Gerda, filled with renewed hope, thanked them and ran to her boat, ignoring the old woman's cries to stay, for her love was now stronger than any spell. Thus her journey continued, carrying her through vast forests and across fields until she reached a grand white stone palace guarded by a black crow who spoke with surprising clarity, asking why she wandered alone, and when Gerda explained she sought her friend Kay, the crow told her of a prince inside who might resemble him. So that night the crow guided her through kitchens and corridors, until they reached the royal bedroom where the prince and princess slept, but Gerda's heart sank when she saw that though the prince had warm and kind eyes, he was not Kay. Yet, the princess, upon learning Gerda's tale, offered her compassion, giving her warm clothing, a golden carriage, and provisions to help her journey northward. But before long, deep within a dark forest, the shimmering carriage caught the attention of robbers who leapt from the shadows to seize it, dragging Gerda to their camp where the robber leader's wild young daughter claimed Gerda as her companion. Though fierce and unpredictable, the girl was not unkind, and after hearing Gerda's story, she became oddly protective of her. And that night, moved by a strange affection, she freed Gerda, leading her to the stables where reindeer and pigeons were kept, pointing out one great northern reindeer who knew the way to the Snow Queen's palace, urging Gerda to flee while the robbers slept. The reindeer, swift as the winter wind, carried Gerda across vast snowy plains and frozen lakes, stopping only once at the hut of a wise Lapland woman who fed them and wrote a message on dried fish, sending them farther north to a Finland woman who dwelled in an icy stone hut beneath smoke-filled skies. And when Gerda told her everything, the Finland woman explained gently that no magic she could grant would defeat the Snow Queen, for Gerda already possessed the greatest power, her pure heart and her love, which could melt any ice. So the woman blessed her but gave no other gifts, and the reindeer carried Gerda to the very edge of the Snow Queen's domain, where he could go no farther. Gerda kissed him goodbye and walked alone into the blinding winds, praying softly as the world around her turned white and silent. The Snow Queen's palace rose before her like a monument carved from winter itself, its halls made of snowflakes arranged with perfect symmetry, vast rooms echoing with cold stillness, northern lights shimmering like burning ribbons above, and in the center of the palace, on a frozen lake smooth as a mirror, sat Kay, pale, unmoving, his eyes dull and icy, attempting endlessly to form the word eternity from scattered shards of ice. For the Snow Queen had promised him freedom and mastery of the world if he could solve this impossible puzzle. And it was in this desolate hall that Gerda found him, dropping to her knees in sobs as she embraced him, her warm tears falling onto his chest, one slipping deep into his frozen heart where it melted the mirror shard lodged within, causing him to tremble violently as the spell broke. Then Gerda kissed his eyes, and the icy splinter in them slid out like a grain of sand, allowing him to see clearly once more, and he cried out her name with sudden joy, marveling that she had come for him. As their love rekindled, the vast palace trembled, cracking, melting, dissolving as though dawn itself had entered the halls, and the frozen lake shattered into brilliant liquid light. Hand in hand, Kay and Gerda walked out of the collapsing palace into the brightening sky where the faithful reindeer waited to carry them home. They traveled back through lands they once crossed in fear past the Finland woman's hut, the Lapland woman's fire, over snowy plains that now glowed with the promise of spring until eventually the trees grew green again and the familiar sights of home appeared. When they reached their town, everything was as it had been. The houses with their touching gutters, the rose boxes blooming with summer flowers, the peaceful streets, and as they sat together by the roses, hands clasped tightly, they realized they were older now, though their hearts remained as pure as ever. And when the old church clock struck 12, ringing clear and bright across the warm air, they understood deeply, tenderly, that though the world contained thorns and snow and mirrored shards of cruelty, it was also filled with roses, living, gentle, beautiful, and that true love, courageous and innocent, had the power to melt even the coldest heart.